everybody, Decima here. I'm so excited to introduce episode number 73. I'm here with Jacob, who interviewed Shane this week. Hey, Jacob, how's it going tonight?
Hey Decima, I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. I'm not going to lie, I had a rough week, but I bounced back much better than I would have had I been on Kratom.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. Yeah, the couple times I've
Yeah, right.
not the couple times. I think the one time I've gotten sick since I've gotten off it, I bounced back super fast like I wouldn't have. But yeah, I did talk to Shane. It was a good discussion. I'm gonna leave you guys in suspense and let you guys listen to that one without giving any teasers this week, but I think you'll enjoy the convo. This intro, I think we were going to talk a little bit about people pleasing, which I don't think is a topic we've discussed on the podcast in the intro yet. People pleasing is quite common with addiction and people that have addictions. That's not to say everybody does it, but it can be a quite common trait. And that looks like always trying to please people, sometimes succumbing to peer pressure, feeling like you have to do things that you don't want to do because you're trying to please someone else. So I'll give you an example. My mother can be the stereotypical Italian American mother and lay guilt trips on me about doing this, that, or the other thing. And I cannot tell you how many times I have succumbed to that. And in the past, I would get through that by using drugs or alcohol. And sometimes it went okay, and sometimes it was a complete and total fucking disaster. That is one extreme example of what people pleasing can be, but really it's all those things. And yeah, it's something that I've been working on a lot in recovery. That's not to say I don't do things for my family or do things that I don't necessarily love to do all the time. That's different. I enjoy, even if it's an activity that maybe I wouldn't choose, if a family member I love and care about picks something and it's important to them, I don't mind doing it, and I'll usually have a decent time because I'm there to support them and what they love. That's the difference, in my opinion, between like people pleasing and maybe doing some things that aren't your favorite thing to do.
Oh, yeah, that definitely sounds like two different things there. This is such an interesting topic. I will admit it's not one that I've thought about a lot, but you're making me think about it. I will say that I feel like I don't people please as much now or try to people please as much now as I did when I was using. I think I had a lot of things I was masking, a lot of anxiety, social anxiety, fears of acceptance, and just all the pressures that society puts on us that and we put on ourselves. Yeah, and so I actually want to say that I feel good about the fact that I put myself first a lot more now. Like whenever I dug into recovery this time, I just made it a priority and I didn't really care so much about, okay, I take that back. I'm not going to say I didn't care. I did care, but at the same time, I didn't. I knew that my recovery was so important that it had to come first this time. But there are still situations where I do find myself people pleasing and wondering if people are trying to just please me as well, especially when it comes to like at work or just different, like maybe volunteer projects and things. It,
Yeah.
it, yeah, it does. I have a tendency to wonder what people are thinking or wonder if I'm coming across wrong and become hyper self-aware whenever I
Yeah.
get to feeling that way. I do think it's greatly improved since I quit using Kratom though. What do you think? Has it improved for you?
Oh, like leaps and bounds. Yeah, when I was using
Yeah.
Kratom, well, one of the big things that I wouldn't say drove me to people please more, but definitely enabled it was just the guilt and the shame of using Kratom. And essentially, I used it mostly in secret for
Mhm.
most of the time. So for me, it was like, it was doubly like, was the people pleasing aspect of, oh, I really don't want to do this thing, but I'm going to do it anyways. And then the shame of having to do it all fucked up because I couldn't not do it that way because I didn't want to do it. And like all of that. So yeah, I don't have any of that anymore. I still, to a degree, find myself sometimes going down the path of people pleasing or even doing it, but nowhere near the amount when I was doing Kratom or drinking or using other drugs like at all. I think you brought up an interesting point about work too. I think that's a tricky one because you can't just, how do I say this? You can't just be like, fuck you, I don't want to do this. I don't like it at work because you're getting paid. So you have to roll with it. And to get ahead, a lot of times you have to maybe do some things that aren't your favorite thing to do. But at the same time, I think there's a way to make that professional and do it and not be like a kiss ass. So there's like a balance.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if some of it has to do with like back in the using days, if that people pleasing stemmed a little bit from let's just do what they want, let's please them and take the attention off of us and what we're doing over here. You know what I'm saying? I think that may have come into play a little bit for me as well.
I think so too. I also want to say that I do think age is a factor because I don't know if you had this experience, but I remember when I was like 30, I was like, oh, I don't give a shit anymore. And that was like, because I gave a shit in my 20s. But then when I got to my 40s, I was like, I really don't give a fuck what anybody thinks anymore. So I think that's a progression too. But I can't decouple that experience from, is that just the nature of aging? Or is that like the nature of growing and getting out of being deep in active addiction? Or is it both? I think it's probably both.
Yeah, you and I have both in common, so that's a parallel there. Anecdotal, they
Yeah, I
say.
think so.
Yeah.
And
But
anecdotal
it's
evidence.
good
Yeah,
though. Either way, we're gonna ride that wave.
I
It's
think so.
sobriety is an amazing thing. It really is.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's all these gifts and benefits that I don't know, really even, I didn't even really think about when I was getting sober. No, there's things that I appreciate that I just took for granted for a long time, which is really good.
I guess I would want to say my final thought on the subject would be people please to a certain extent, like not to where you're selling yourself short. You need to please yourself. And once you please yourself, it's going to be so much easier to make others happy in a genuine way rather than in a people pleasing way.
Yeah, I agree with that. You got to love yourself first before you can really love anybody else or really anything else. And then I think the other just rule of thumb is don't be a dick. That's
Yeah.
really all I think I have to say.
I actually heard a saying that I love recently. Learn to love yourself as much as you love getting high. Ooh,
That's a
I
good
love that
one.
one.
Yeah, that is a really good one. Learn to love yourself as much as you love getting high. I could get down with that.
That's deep.
That is, maybe
Well,
we
that
should
was
let
a
that
great
have the
topic.
last word. Yeah, it was a great topic.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Jacob. It was so good to chat tonight.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. Tonight, our guest is Shane. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well this evening. It's been a good day. Interesting
Nice.
day. Warm day, but good day.
Interesting, warm, and good are all positive things in my book. Shane, how would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners? Things like profession, age, location, family, stuff like that.
So I am 36. I am originally from Pennsylvania. I live in Baltimore, Maryland now. I'm an IT guy by trade now. I was in the addictions field for a little while and got out of that about 10, 12 years ago. I am a nerd, like 100%. I like fantasy stuff, Star Wars, sci-fi, Legos. I have a collection of Ninja Turtles action figures. And I collect old classic video game consoles. A little bit into the nerddom, yeah.
Just a little bit. We won't hold that against you. No, I can nerd out on some things myself too. Where in Pennsylvania, if you don't mind me asking, are you originally from?
I grew up in Williamsport. It's north central Pennsylvania. They're known for the Little League World Series. That's about it.
I grew up outside of Pittsburgh. I've been around Pennsylvania myself with family, and my wife's from the Philadelphia area. Why don't we get right into it? Tell me a little bit about how you first got involved with Kratom, how you first found out about it, encountered it, tried it, that sort of thing.
Cool. Yeah. So my experience started, I was I had been in recovery for some time, probably around, this was like the 9-year mark for me. I was completely abstinent. I was, before, when I was younger and in high school, it had been opiates and painkillers, oxycodone, hydrocodone, the whole gamut. And then college, it went to alcohol because I'm the replacement type. So like I'll replace one addiction for another a lot of the times. That's a very common theme. I always hear you guys talking about addiction whack-a-mole. I've been playing that game for my whole life. That's been definitely me. In about 2019, 2020, I started using mostly CBD, but I started CBD and then started cannabis for medical reasons. And I went back home to visit a friend one time, and he introduced me to Kratom. I was like, I've heard of it and I've seen it before, but what does it do? I was like, does it interact well with marijuana? And he's, oh, it's like spaghetti and meatballs. I started taking capsule form, and there was a couple times where it just, low dosage, maybe a couple maybe like up to 3 milligrams at a time when I first started. And then when I had increased the dose, I realized that it was like, I got that aha moment, was like, oh, wait a second. I know what this does. I know what this is. My brain knew what this was. And it was very similar to the opiates I had taken. And I was like, okay, this could be a problem. And that was my introduction. I didn't do any real further research on it before. I ended up getting off of, I was still participating, and this was during the pandemic. I was still participating here and there in AA, and my recovery was very off because I was using other substances and wasn't really fitting that AA mold. And it led me the first time, and this was 2021. I had been on it for probably about the same period that I was on it recently. I had been on it for about 9 months before it started. It's probably 8 or 9 months. At that 7-month mark, it started turning on me. It started increasing. I recently found out that I don't have ADHD. I have OCD. I have the anxiety that goes along with that. And all it did was increase those symptoms. And then when I got off of it, it was even worse. And at first, I had no idea back in 2021 when I got off, when I cold turkeyed that and cannabis at the same time. And those were the only 2 substances I was using. I had no idea that's what it was. I was in the dark completely. I wasn't very well informed on Kratom. I wasn't very well informed on a lot of that stuff. But then when I came off cold turkey recently, I was like, I know what this is. I know what that was.
Yeah, it clicks eventually. I didn't have that same experience, but a similar one where I knew probably from the beginning that it was going to be a problem because it kicked off those similar feelings that you mentioned to opiates. And yeah, it just sneaks up on you. Question about the anxiety and the depression and stuff. I'm just curious, because you have prior experience with opiates and coming off of those. I found the depression to be, and the anxiety to be like so much worse coming off Kratom than traditional opiates. I was just curious if that was your experience too.
That was definitely my experience too. It felt like it's more sustained when it comes to Kratom. It's very, yeah, it's, and
Yeah.
I call it the liar. If my friends ask me about it, I'm like, it's a liar. Or if I see somebody post online, like on Reddit, I'm like, this is a liar. Like, it will lie to you. It will tell you it's okay. And your brain will accept that, especially because it's such a thing, like opiates, is that it isolates you from everybody else. And that's what it wants you to be isolated, so it can run this crazy narrative in your head that you're losing it. And that's what I felt like. That was my tipping point both times, was that like, I'm losing.
Okay, so both times you had a similar experience where you felt like you were losing it, as you put it. So the first time you said you didn't put two and two together, the experience that you mentioned, I've had a couple of conversations with people in 12-step groups, and I did the same thing. I don't do 12-step, I do a different recovery program, SMART, but I also was going to meetings and stuff for a little while before I said fuck it when I first got into Kratom, because I believed all the stuff about that it was harmless and I was sober, but it sounds like you had a similar
Right,
experience
you
there.
can get it at the gas station. It's fine.
Exactly. It's very much one of those things where it can be easy to justify its continual usage and to not see it as a problem. A couple of times the two times you've quit, did you do anything to help with getting through the acute withdrawals either time, or how was that experience?
So I think the first time back in 21, because I had no idea that's what was causing it, that the Kratom was causing it. It was like I was going through acute withdrawals, but I didn't use anything else. I had CBD here and there, maybe a CBD gummy here and there. But yeah, I didn't know. I was like, why do I just feel the anhedonia was real, the restless leg? I didn't have too much acute sickness because I had started tapering down. But this time around, I was like, I know what's coming. Like, I know what's coming around the bend. And yeah, back in May, when I stopped, I also stopped taking Vyvanse, an ADHD medication. So I was doing stimulants and Kratom quit at the same time, cold turkey. And I needed the vitamin C. I needed the DLPA, the magnesium, and all that fun stuff. Like all those supplements were pretty much key. And I did supplement some cannabis in there as well to get some sleep every now and then. And they also increased the my Zoloft prescription for me at that time because we're figuring out, hey, Shane has OCD. He doesn't have ADHD. I was on Vyvanse prescribed, but it was just taking me like to this crazy point where obsessions and anxiety, and it was just like full force. I just couldn't shut my brain off. And the only thing that was shutting off for any period of time was like a scoop of Kratom here and there. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I know this cycle.
Yeah, I could totally see how a stimulant could cause someone with obsessive compulsive disorder to further obsess on things and do the exact opposite of what the treatment was probably intended to actually do with that misdiagnosis, obviously. Yeah, that had to be a tough.
Yeah. I'd also gone through the weight loss period as well. And people were starting to be like, are you all right? You okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I just need to get work done. I just need to move and keep doing stuff. And there was no off switch for me. And I couldn't maintain it. I ended up burning myself out pretty awfully. I went at my job, I had taken on another role temporarily until we hired a new person. So I was doing administrative tasks and then I was doing some of our other software. And it felt like I was burning the candle at both ends. And there were no breaks.
Yeah, I worked in tech for a while, and I've definitely been in that situation. I was not using Kratom at the time, but alcohol and cocaine will help there too. That's a whole other story. But anyways, yeah, so I could see how that happened. For your last quit, how did the first 30 days go, and what did you do differently or what kind of clicked this time to make it stick, you think?
Honestly, like I found the subreddit, I found the Quitting Kratom subreddit, and that was helpful. Because I'm also in that I'm trying to do more smart recovery type things. I've distanced myself a little bit from the AA world. I've been in the AA world for 14 years. And yeah, that's probably a whole nother story and another like disclaimer warning and stuff like that. But yeah, I was trying different recovery methodology. I think this time what stuck with me is that I know as well. And one of my friends is also doing the same thing. He's also detoxing off Kratom, and it's like really crazy for him. He's got a ton of health issues. And I noticed, okay, blood pressure is off the charts. Sleep is terrible. I've lost like 40 pounds. Can't do this. Cannot do this. Can't go back to it. But I knew what that process from before was like. And it was back up in 23. So from 21 to 23, from October or from May. Yeah, about April, May 2021 until October of 23 was really like, I knew that if I just get through this and continue to push and continue to stay abstinent, like I'll be all right. It's going to take a little bit, but it'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice for the listeners. So I want to highlight that. I was actually talking to someone today on a Facebook group that I moderate for quitting Kratom, and she was like, it's day 2, and I think she was a MAT patient. But anyways, she was like, all this stuff was bothering me. And I was like, just the only advice I really gave her was like, just remember it's temporary and you'll get through it. It's just a matter of time. It's easy to say, but like the suffering is only temporary, and you will get through that. So if you're in the middle of cold turkey withdrawal or tapering or discomfort from kratom detox or pause or any of that, just remember that it is only temporary. And if you stick with it, it will get better.
Yeah, because it's not worth going back into the cycle. Like I know, because I'm the person, like I pick up once and then it's like, this feels good. I'm going to pick up every single day after this. And while I might stay at a lower-ish dose, it's still the same. The results are always going to be the same. And yeah, it just ends up being a cycle. And I know, and it becomes an obsession. And when it becomes an obsession that I need to take a look at it. And therapy, I've been in therapy. The first 30 days, I hit a ton of smart recovery, the Kratom meetings online, the dopey meetings. And it was super, super helpful for me. And I listen to the podcast all the time. So shout out to you. Listen, and also congratulations to you and Decima. I just listened to the 1 year podcast.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I think what you're saying is really good advice, though. I truly believe that there is no one recovery program that is the right recovery program. So I think there is nuggets and value in each of them. Some of them you're probably going to gravitate to one as maybe your favorite or the program that's right for you if you're listening to this, but there's usually something of value in any of them, and the right one at a different time might not be the right one now. So just if you went to a meeting and you didn't feel like it worked for you, don't give up is what I would say. There's lots of different recovery programs based on everything from your traditional 12-step faith-based programs all the way to recovery for atheists, which I can't remember the name, but it's out there. Anyways, there's lots of various programs out there. One other question on when you were going through the withdrawals, you mentioned using the vitamin C, the DLPA. Did you find that helpful? Would you recommend that for other guests? Just curious if how you found the supplements to help with the...
Yeah, I feel maybe it might be a placebo thing. It might not be, but the DLPA was like, I take that first thing in the morning and I feel like it would level me out for at least a little bit. And I was like, okay, this is great. And this is only 500 milligrams. And then the vitamin C, ibuprofen, and Tylenol because my head just would be hurting every day. And then just trying to also stay well hydrated as well was another big thing because I'm terrible with that. I'll chug down coffee, and I haven't done energy drinks for a long time, which is probably for the best. But I feel like that they were making the withdrawal process a little bit worse because I'd go way up and then I'd come down, way up, come down. Lots of sugar, lots of caffeine. But now it was just like staying focused on something other than using.
That's really good advice as well. Focus on something other than using. How long now have you been abstinent from Kratom this time?
It's been 49 days.
Awesome. Congratulations to you. That's great. Yeah, it can be a rocky road for sure, and with a lot of ups and downs. Previous addictions to alcohol, opiates. Have you had any relapses on those, or have you been able to maintain long-term sobriety from both of those? And has Kratom really been your only kind of problem in the last couple of years?
No, I haven't had alcohol. I put down in 2010, so it's been a good almost 14 years.
That's huge. Congrats on that.
And that's what I was like. I was always like, not drinking. I'm not drinking. I'm still doing recovery oriented things. So it was like a double-edged sword. So it was like some justification, but also, dude, you're still doing stuff. And opiates, I haven't touched a proper opiate since 2005. So it's
Yeah.
been even for that. Kratom being an opioid, but then also the stimulants this time around, I think was what opened that door back up. Because if I look back on it and say I was maintaining, doing really well, just cannabis every now and then, and still going to meetings, still maintaining abstinence from everything. And then I was like, I think there's something going on mentally, because it's like a lot of my usage has always been like mental health related and like self medication.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe I have ADHD. And I started taking Adderall. And then I was like, okay, this is working. So maybe I can get onto a prescription for something like this. But in the meantime, I was like, maybe I'll just supplement that with Kratom, because I know that like in low doses, it'll provide that
It'll act as
stimulant.
a stimulant.
But it was like, and then when I'm on a steady prescription, I will go off of it. But I realized like how much they were interacting with each other and how much like it's still been there, even though I'm on the proper medication and it's well managed. I'm like, I still want that little bit of boost. I still want that. And it was always
Yeah,
easy.
you
I'd go
want
to the vape shop and be like, oh yeah, just give me a bottle of that. And then the extracts came into play too. It was like they had the chocolates that are 100. They're about the size of a Ghirardelli square, and they're 100 ml per square.
Okay, that's a decent sized dose.
Yeah, and it says on it, don't do more than a half in an hour period. And I'm like, funny, eating chunks of that at a time. And that, like, those really kicked off the mental aspect of things and the physical, because I noticed like I was just a complete and utter mess on any type of extract type deal.
Yeah. It's interesting with that you bring up the dosages, because I noticed that they have these 7-hydroxymetrogenine tabs now, and I don't know if all of them say this, but I was reading an article about this the other day, and the doctor that was writing the article was saying that the dosage instructions say to take half. And I'm going to myself, who's going to take half of that pill to start out? They're just going to take the whole thing. So it's like disingenuous, because they're trying to say, no, the serving, there's 4 servings here, but there's just 2 pills. It was like, it doesn't make any sense. And I remember that with extracts too. Some of the liquid ones, they'd be like, the serving size in this little bottle is 4 things. And I don't even know, the bottle's so small. How would I even be able to divvy that up?
Yeah, and I actually I got one of the FFs. What I'm talking about, the blue
I know
ones.
what you're talking about.
I don't know how I didn't get sucked into that as well, because I took half one day and I was like, and the rest I put in my closet. I knew that it was like hella strong.
Yeah.
And I took half of it, and I don't know if I had mixed so much or fell asleep or something and didn't really remember how much it activated. But yeah, there's always, and people they would say right on, I only take half of this, start at a half or start at a quarter. And I went to a shop too, because we have, cannabis is legal here, of course, but then they have shops where they sell like THCA and hemp products. And this guy was also selling Kratom products alongside. And he had the 7-OH capsules, and you take one of those, take half of those, and it feels like Oxycontin. And I was like, I don't want that. But he had a bunch of other stuff there too. So it's out there and it's available. And I don't think people are as educated on it as they should be.
No, I don't think they are either. And I think that's one of the most disingenuous things about the whole Kratom industry. It's one thing to say you have to take personal accountability for the choices you make. And I 100% agree with that. As a drug addict and an alcoholic, I have to take accountability, and I do take accountability for the choices I made. However, I do think with Kratom, it's a bit different, because if you started taking it 5-10 years ago, none of this stuff was out there. There was no warnings about addiction. There was nothing when I started. It was basically, if you turned over a couple of rocks, you could find a little bit of information about this might be a bad idea. 99.9% of it was all, this is the best herb ever. It's harmless. It's wonderful. It solves everything from depression. I had someone had actually recommended it to me in a stop drinking group as something to deal with alcohol cravings, which was one of the reasons why I started doing it for myself. Anyways, so I think the argument is a bit disingenuous, saying like people have to take personal accountability for their kratom uses. When you walk into a store and it's legal and you don't have any education on them, it's not opiates or alcohol or cocaine, where from a young age you're taught, or at least that there could be some consequences with this use. A lot of people are walking into this thinking that at best or at worst, this is a product on par with marijuana, having no idea that the repeated use of this could lead to dependence and potentially addiction. So I don't know. I have trouble reconciling with that sometimes, about like when people are very much on the personal responsibility train, but not giving everybody the full information they need to make a well-informed decision.
And that's like my introduction back in 2020 was like, oh yeah, this is just something that pairs really well with marijuana. And it was, you go to the head shop, you just, give me the whatever and give me the kratom as well. I would go and buy wraps and get kratom. It was just a thing. And I didn't know. But when I went into it this time, I knew. Like in the back of my mind, I was like, you have to, this is a different beast. And we still do those mind gymnastics, right? Where you trick yourself into being like, oh yeah, I can handle this. And then when you can't handle it anymore, you're like, shit. Because like when I went into it this time in 23, it was, I thought maybe I can control this, but it's still that same cycle where it'll consume you, right? You can do all the gymnastics you want in your mind, but it is what it is. It's still heavy, and I think it's still so new too, that like I said, people don't know what they're getting into. And now with the extract products and the 7-OH products, it's like, dude, this is gas station heroin.
Yeah. I only know one person that I've ever met in my life that legitimately, and I don't even believe them, but that was like, I want to be a drug addict when I grow up. And that was just one person in high school that they actually said that to me at one point. And I thought it was sarcasm, but they did end up being a drug addict and overdosing and dying. But anyways, I think most people, what you said, you never go into a situation with kratom or with really any drug and you say, I'm going to get addicted to this. It's always, I'm going to use this today or for fun and it'll be fine. That's usually what most people tell themselves. And unfortunately, for some of us, it's not fine, which there's a lot that goes into that, unfortunately. Yeah, you had mentioned, just for the listeners, we had talked a little bit before we started that you've been experiencing some like brain fog and some after effects of kratom. Now that you've been off of it for almost 50 days, what are you still dealing with, and how are you working through the after effects of detoxing off kratom and getting sober again this time?
So I've definitely noticed some more brain fog and like forgetfulness. The anhedonia is still, it'll creep in. So today was probably like one of the more like anhedonia like days for me. So that's why I said it was an interesting day. And I'm just like, man, like I think about that. And that's usually and I'm recognizing that's a huge trigger for me. Especially because like with mixing stimulants and trying to get that stimulant effect from it, I was like, if there's times when I'm like in a lull or I'm not doing anything, that's when I know that it's gonna crop up again. The way I've been combating that is to try and stay busy and try and take my focus to something else. And it can be good or it can be bad, right? It could be work or it could be YouTube or it could be one of another 1,000 things. And usually the healthy thing is for me, like I'll go and I'll cook something and that'll get me out of that like headspace for a little bit. I'll listen to some lo-fi, cook a dinner for my girlfriend, and I'm out of that headspace and I'm doing something and I'm being active, take the dog out for a walk, just trying to do something other than what I would normally do, which is most of the time sit and watch YouTube videos or play video games.
Yeah, that's really good advice though. Like the healthy build, I think what you're mentioning is build healthy, or I'll paraphrase what you said and what I interpreted it to mean. I think build and do healthy kind of habits to essentially allow yourself to work through the anhedonia and the mental stuff. Cause I think cooking and that taking your dog for a walk and doing those healthy things are good ways to help get your mind off the funk, at least for a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. And go to a meeting or catch an online meeting, even just listening to a podcast or just connecting a little bit in recovery, because I can get real obsessed with recovery as well. And where I'm like on Reddit all day, like reading people's posts, and I'm like, oh yeah, I feel that. And then you start to prophesize into it. And no, but it'll help you. And if you find people and find a good recovery community and find meetings that you like and that work for you, keep going. And if you find what you'll find is people that are supportive. And I think that's the most important thing, is having support and being like, listen, I'm having a rough ass day. What are you doing? And getting off of the story and the movie that's playing in my head, because the movie that plays in my head when I'm in really crazy, either detox or just in obsession, is everything's bad and everything's turning to shit. And I have to spin that back around.
Yeah, you said a lot of really good points in that last response to the obsessing about recovery. Oh man, I've done that myself so many times. I can't tell you how many times I've had to pull myself out of making comments on Reddit or groups about recovery, because I'm like, I feel like the need to tell people this thing that's in my brain when someone's already repeated it 20 times in all the comments already. It's, what else am I going to add to that conversation? Maybe I could just read the post and move on. But I like you, I can get, I don't know, it's almost an addiction in and of itself to feel like I have to go shout from the rooftops about this one thing when it's not necessarily adding all that value. So I definitely feel you on that for sure.
Yeah, I have the curse too of all the information. Like, I've been in the recovery community for like almost 20 years, and like I have all the information and I can always like articulate, but like application is always another issue for me, because I'm an addict.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, I'm an addict, and I'm really good at spinning that, and I'm really good at making you believe I know what I'm doing and what I'm talking about. And I think it kept me sick for a lot longer than I needed to be.
Yeah. Not only am I good at that, I'm also good about convincing myself that I'm right and that I'm good at that, which is a dangerous situation for an addict to be in. So I'm also working on that. Yeah, but every guest that I've interviewed so far has said one thing in common. And I think if you listen to every interview that we've done on this podcast, other than the couple that were with special guests or were focused on maybe when we had a scientist on or something like that, they've all said the same thing. And the one thing is, you have to essentially make that personal connection with someone to break the chains of addiction. There's no, like you said, go to a meeting or tell someone in person or have a conversation with a friend about what you're going through and how you're doing it. You need that accountability, I believe, to be able to stay on track. So I think we reiterate that a lot on this podcast, but I think it's worthy of reiteration over and over again, because the online groups and making comments and doing it on your own will get you so far. But the minute you break the silence and you actually tell someone in your personal life what you're going through, things will change immediately.
Yeah, and I'm blessed that I have a really close friend who I said he was going through the same thing, and we started back up. I have a pretty decent story about that, actually, because I had been off for so long, off of Kratom, and I remember he made a post on Facebook, right, where it was, I'm looking for something to manage the pain in my neck, because he's got neck nerve damage. I think we all have some type of damage as well, because we abused our bodies rigorously throughout the years. And somebody had commented on it before, and this is before I went back to using, and they had said, use Kratom. And I'm just like, the only thing I wrote underneath the comment was no. We had both gone back to it at about the same time. And he was like, are you sure about this? Because you were pretty candid in the past about your experiences. And like you were saying, the mental gymnastics and the way that I can convince myself that things are okay is the scariest part. And even after being very vocal and very, dude, don't get back on it because this stuff messes up your brain chemistry. It'll put you in a depression. It'll put you in this state. Yeah, all those things came true again. And they came true for me because I went back to it. There's only that aspect to it where, like I said before, it's a liar and it will lie to you and tell you it's okay.
Yeah. All of that is so true. And the other thing that I do is so many times when I relapsed on Kratom, I knew everything you just said, and I'd be like, that's other Jacob's problem. Today, Jacob wants to get high. Other Jacob, tomorrow, he can deal with the consequences of what today Jacob wants to do. which is a problem and something that took a lot of work to recognize that instant gratification is not the pathway to happiness, essentially. It took a long time for me to realize that.
Yeah, I'm still realizing.
Yeah, to a certain degree, I still am too.
Yeah, and I'm still like in that mode. So you could do this and feel better, and do the long term thing because it's way better, and you know that it's way better because you've been through this already. Been through this several times already.
Yeah, totally. If you were to give someone your top tip who was getting ready to quit Kratom, what would that top tip be?
Just do it and stick to it. That's really all I can say is that I know both times. And if you have to do medicated assistant or medication assistance, look into it, go to your doctor, find somebody who's informed about it, find an addiction professional who's informed about it. Because even my primary doctor wasn't as informed about it as my therapist was. Find somebody that's informed about addiction. And I think you say this too, is burn the ship, that ship and tell somebody about it and be like, listen, I fell into this and I need help. And it's just like any other addiction. You have to really just make that decision and stick to it. I think that's what it was for me is I had to have that realization. I had to have that eye-opening experience where I was basically in a panic attack every single day to say, I don't want to live like this anymore. And I know that on the other side, it is better. It might not seem like it, but it does get better.
Yeah, there are a lot of terms in recovery that can sound cliche, but they're true. And I was sick and tired of being sick and tired is such a true statement because there's only so many times that, I don't know, for me, I'm going to speak for me, there were only so many times before I just said enough. I cannot bring myself to go through another relapse and withdrawal cycle on this shit. I just can't do it again. And it was the same with booze or with opiates. It was just like you get to a point where you're either going all in, and that's probably going to lead you to a road that is probably going to be death or something else, prison, I don't know. Or you decide that you just can't do it anymore. And that breaking point, I think, is different for everybody.
Yeah, and it's finding a reason to quit for yourself, too, is that I know that Kratom and other substances are going to just exacerbate and make my mental health way worse. I'm trying to heal and I'm trying to go along the right path today. So the more and more I can realize that these things aren't good for me mentally, and I will end up in a different spot that I don't want to be in. I have to remember that and just say, for you, for your own health, for your own sanity, and for who you want to be in the future, just lay it down and realize that it's okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. My therapist told me this the other week. She was saying, like, remember when you're on the airplane and the mask comes down, they always say, make sure you put your mask on before you put a child's mask on or assist others. You can't fix anything else in your life that other people need your help with until you get yourself straight. At some point, you got to put yourself first. Cool. So I guess maybe one or two more questions, and then I think we can wrap up here. Let's switch it up. So I've been asking a lot about travel, so I'm going to ask a different personal question today. Do you have any pets? And if so, what are their names? What kind of pets do you have?
I do. I have a dog. His name is Ari. You probably heard him. He is a rescue dog. Now, he is very non-social and not a social dog. So it's been probably a source of trauma throughout the years as well. But he is about 10, 12 years old, and he's awesome, like in his own right. Now, I wish I could get him out and about more with people, but it's just not in the cards for him. He's definitely been through some traumatic events himself before I got him. Like, I got him from a shelter. But he's been my homie. That's what we do. That first couple of days of going through the crazy rumination and obsessive thoughts during detox, I took him outside, and one night we just sat outside and talked. I talked to the dog because it's better than talking to myself for a little bit. So I just walked around, enjoyed how nice it was before it got stupid hot outside. And we were just enjoying the outdoors and walking around. And that's how I ground myself. Sometimes I talk to him and I'm like, Ari, what do you think? And he just looks at me. He loves me unconditionally, and that's how it goes.
Yeah. Pets can be a great source of something to lean on when you're in the thick of trying to get sober and just in general when you're having a bad day. I have an extremely social bulldog, so if you want to get your socializing, you can come on up and take her for a walk. She'd love it.
Yeah, no, and but it's been good.
Good.
I moved in with my girlfriend recently, and in the midst of all this, and it's been good. She has a cat. We have to keep the cat and the dog separated because the cat's also not a social cat.
All right.
So we say they're the misfit animals, and it is true. But we get to go out and walk them every now and then when it's not stupid hot outside, and it works for what we have and the cards we were dealt. We make it work. I think that's the most important thing, and that's a recovery thing too. Is to look at the cards you were dealt and make it work to the best of your ability. And most of the time, you're doing a lot better than you think you.
Yeah. Most of the time you are, and give yourself grace too. That's what I would say. Anybody who's listening to this, if you relapsed or if you're struggling to get off and you're doing that, today's the day I'm going to quit, and then you find yourself at this door at 5 p.m., just don't give up. Give yourself some grace. We've all been there. You don't make these changes overnight. Some people, I'm always fascinated and honestly envious of the people that are able to get addicted to one substance, get sober, and stay sober forever. That is what we call a unicorn in the recovery world because it doesn't happen very often. And if you're able to do that, you're super, super fortunate. I'm very envious of you. So give yourself grace. At the same time, don't give yourself enough grace that you relapse over and over again until the end of time, because that's not good either. But just keep moving forward. That's all you can do, and don't quit quitting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that. Don't quit quitting, because it's going to be, like we said before, it's going to be sometimes addiction whack-a-mole, especially if you just have that personality type. But you just tackle the day, and it's still one day at a time is still a really good way to put it. And sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's a couple minutes. But if you can just wait it out for those couple minutes, those couple hours, those couple days, it will get better. And you'll notice that you're growing, and that the pain will bring growth. And that's what I always look at too, is that, this is painful. This is not comfortable. But also, if I'm always comfortable, I'm not making any type of growth. I'm not making any type of changes that are uncomfortable, right? I'm not moving forward. I'm not progressing. So I know that if there's a little bit of pain, then I'm making some growth. That the other end of this, I'm going to come out a little bit stronger.
Yeah, very good advice as well. There's not an ability to move forward in stagnation, and if you're stuck on Kratom, it's really going to hold you back in the long run. Eventually, you're going to have to bite that bullet, and there's really no better day than today.
Absolutely. Yeah, just realize that it's one of those things that will make you, like I said, it'll make you think that it's okay. It'll lie to you and tell you that you'll be all right, just take more. But the more and more you stay stuck in that cycle, the more and more you're just going to stagnate and drift away. And what quitting does, at least what it's done for me, is that it's broken me out of that. It's broken me out of my own thought patterns. And it's really, I have to get out and ask for help. And I have to get out and explore the world and learn recovery and what recovery means for me.
Yeah, there's no shame in needing to get help. A lot of us needed that to get sober. I know I did more than once. If you're stuck and you don't see another way forward, don't feel like you have to do it on your own. There's all kinds of resources, regardless of how privileged you are. And if you can afford the most fancy rehab to the most free online resource, it's all there. And there's all kinds of middle grounds that you can choose from to find the right kind of mix of recovery program for you. Shane, before we wrap up tonight, are there any questions you have for me, or was there any topic that you'd like to discuss, or anything else about your story that you'd like to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
I'm not good at this question. This is like the end of the interview, like the job interview question. Do you have any questions for us? It's usually, how much money are you going to pay?
Unfortunately, this is not a paid gig. We can pay you in cookies or something, maybe.
No, I guess the only other thing is that, like I was saying before, find a recovery path that works for you. I spent a lot of time doing for others. And in my mind, because I was always a big people pleaser. And if I could quiet that voice in my head sometimes, that's what I was trying to quiet. So with the OCD and with people pleasing, do what works for you and find what works for you. And you will find people that are like you. You'll find people that are your people. You'll find people that are in the same boat. And that's what I found with the meetings and with the podcast, was that this is not as far-fetched and outlandish as I thought it was. Because I'm like, oh my God, I'm addicted to this substance you could buy at a gas station. No, just put that aside. There's other people out there and they're having the same exact struggles that you are. Just move forward, and just whatever that looks like, just continue to move forward.
Yeah, that's great advice and probably a great way to end it. People, we would be here for another hour if I started to talk about all the things that I've worked on with people pleasing over the years. And I have by no means cracked the code on how to not constantly have to check myself on that. So yeah, it can be difficult. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no shame in kratom addiction or being addicted to anything and needing help. Every addiction's addiction, and it's just important to recognize that if something is no longer serving you and no longer adding value in your life, it's best to think about how to move forward without it, in my opinion. All right, with that, I think, Shane, thank you so much again for joining us on the podcast. It was great to hear from you and to keep it kratom free.
Thank you, guys.
Kratom in the headlines. This is Charlie. And thanks, Decima and Jacob, for that opening. The people-pleasing topic reminds me of the saying, do no harm and take no shit. And so for the article this week that we're going to share, Kratom in the News, it's for a piece that is on KQED. It's written by Leslie McClure. It was published on July 1st. It was entitled, Kratom Under Scrutiny, New California Bill Proposes Stricter Controls Amid Growing Concerns. So the top line news is some assembly member in California is proposing a bill, his name is Matt Haney, to set the strictest controls on kratom in the U.S. in one state. It's requiring manufacturers to register products, provide dosage guidelines, warn about addiction risks, restrict sales to only people over age 21, and limit the amount of 7-OHM, the potent kratom alkaloid or a metabolite. And this is because users, as we know from this podcast, report side effects, some of them serious, such as heart issues, fatigue, severe withdrawal symptoms. It can be very addicting for some people, hard to quit. There is some opposition and some support for this. On one hand, the American Kratom Association doesn't like this. They say it's over-regulation. They prefer their own bill, the Customer Protection Act, that's been adopted in 13 states. There's been a lot of personal stories on both positive and negative, both in this article and just around this whole news piece in California. The biggest takeaway is that the legislation aims to balance accessibility with safety. They want stricter controls, protect customers from its potential health risks, and ensure informed usage, reflecting a cautious approach to managing this controversial substance. So I haven't made my mind up on this. I have not read the law yet. I do applaud any effort to be more stringent than the standard KCPA, which is basically kratom self-regulation. I know that I heard the AKA call this sort of like setting up a mini FDA in California. Part of the AKA's opposition to this is there's this other lobbying group who our guest this last Wednesday talked about. This group was founded by the founder of Feel Free, and their group is called the Kratom Leaf Coalition, or maybe the Global Leaf Coalition. And there's some from the AKA that they're trying to set up the marketplace in California to favor the Feel Free products and to restrict other forms of extracts that are popular around the United States, and believe this kava kratom drink to have a sort of a carve out in the law and the restrictions. I take that with some grain of salt because that's the interpretation from the American Creative Association. But it is an interesting behind the scenes thing going on. There's some conflict within the industry. Usually there's a lot of unity. They have a credo, attack on one is attack on all. And they're usually on the same page most of the time. So I will put a link in the show notes about this, and you can check out the article yourself. And just once again, it's like the first example that I'm aware of that doesn't ban Kratom, but makes it way more restricted, way more things in it to protect consumers and prevent serious harms. So check it out yourself and make your own decision about it.
Resource of the week. Hey everybody, it's Jacob, and I am bringing you this week's resource of the week. So essentially, this week, our resource is geared to any of our listeners that may be taking or participating in medicated-assisted treatment, particularly with opioid or opiate replacement drugs like Suboxone or Methadone or Subutex. Basically, any sort of variant of buprenorphine or methadone, which would be very uncommon for Kratom addiction. Anywho, the product that we wanted to bring you this week is one that was recommended to me actually by a member of one of the quitting Kratom Facebook groups that I'm a member of. Essentially, this product is called Vitadone. That's Vita, like vitamin, Done, as in like methadone or Done. Essentially, this product is a vitamin supplement that is geared toward those that have a history of opiate or opioid addiction, Kratom being not an opiate or an opioid, but acting like an opioid, particularly a partial opiate agonist, makes it a good candidate for someone potentially to use this product as well. So essentially, it's really geared toward helping and alleviating side effects that could be present when using a medicated-assisted treatment drug. So how did it work for me? Basically, I had some side effects that had to do with sweatiness in the summertime, and I was looking for maybe a way to alleviate some of that, and this product was recommended to me. If the listeners will remember, a while back, Decima and I had a conversation about supplements where I was a skeptic, but I figured, why not try it? So I did, and it actually has worked pretty well. I've noticed that on super hot days this summer, I've been less sweaty than I would have been. So I really do think it's been a helpful product. I have no stake or claim in the company. I don't really know all that much about it other than being a guinea pig myself and trying the product. One thing I did want to point out, it is, I would say, on the pricier side. The cost for a 30-day supply is $30, so it's about $1 a day. You would probably be able to buy the ingredients within the supplement yourself, and if you timed it out over a series of months, I would suspect it would be less expensive than the bundled product. But for convenience reasons and, to be honest, my own sheer laziness, I was willing to pay the extra dollars that came with it, and it's been a success for me. So that's our resource of the week this week. Keep it Kratom free.